Unhappy with your attitudes and your appearances. Carpets are constantly a mess. I find numerous candy wrappers and cigarette butts on the floor. Remember, dirt is our enemy. Also, there's a lack of pride in your uniforms. Shoes are not polished. Look at that face. What, are you afraid of a razor? When did you shave? Last Thursday? You shave an hour before you come to work. That's when you shave. Look at that, dandruff. Remember what I told you? Dandruff means dismissal. Understand? Your hands, your fingernails, dirty. Did you ever see my fingernails? They're immaculate because of my training by the great managers of yesteryears. That's right. There was pride in the old days. Pride when the palace was a palace. When at 14 years of age, I was an usher. Even before 14. I was bringing coffee to projectionists, shining managers' shoes. At 16, I became a manager. That's right, 16 years of age. You guys, you got to shape up. No more respect today. Take that smirk. What's so funny here? What are you laughing at? You got a job here. No one laughs in this theater. I tell you when to laugh, you understand? And another thing. I want disinfectant in each toilet bowl. No more than an ounce in each bowl. I'm coming in here tomorrow. I want to have my breakfast on the men's room floor. And I want it just the way I want it.
Man, that's an obscure film. That's called it's way before Caddyshack and Easy Money. That was a film called The Projectionist, which starred Chuck McCann, very experimental film. Never before had they superimposed characters onto real films. This is, which if people could find the film, The Projectionist, Rodney's not the star. Chuck McCann's the star, but Rodney's got a huge part in it. And really one of the first experimental films of the 60s. And he was one of the major players in that film. He turns into a bat later and flies around as a bat, for what it's worth. I think that might be him flying around as a bat. It's not a comedy. It's really this dark satire. Yeah, no, it's an avant-garde film. But he was the manager of the Palace Theater. That was the part he was playing. You're seeing the legendary Chuck McCann in the background. Rodney had a strange film career. And I'll tell you something else. There's a film in 1956 that no one realizes he did with Sterling Hayden, directed by an obscure director named Kubrick. And Sterling Hayden was the star. Rodney was in it. It's called The Killing. It's about a robbery of a racetrack. 1956, great film by Stanley Kubrick. Rodney's got a small part in that. I don't know where Rodney is in that crowd, but
I'm working on it, dude. I'm working on it.
Yeah, there he is. Oh, there he is. He didn't get any respect. They didn't put him in the front. But I mean, here is 1956, and he's already doing film. So I mean, later on, he gets a call, and we'll get into in the story. But he gets a call in 1993 or 92 from Oliver Stone, like many of us have, and he wants him to be in Natural Born Killers, which is a dramatic part playing a dad to the star of the film, Malloy, Juliette Lewis' dad. And he lets him write his own lines. All of that stuff in Natural Born Killers, which is super freaking dark. It's a parody of a sitcom within it, with an old friend of mine, Edie McClurg, who was a character actress, worked all the time, Edie. She plays the mom. Both of them are killed by Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis. But the sitcom within the movie is like an I Love Lucy sitcom environment, but it's so freaking dark. And Oliver, said that Rodney didn't get the joke. He didn't understand. They talked about it. Not that Oliver would ever get a joke on the earth, since he has no sense of humor. I'm going to side with Rodney on this one. But to his credit, Oliver let him write his own lines. And in fact, there's a scene where he grabs the ass of his daughter and Oliver starts yelling, "Grab her ass, grab her ass," from in the set, and he's directing from this director's chair, yelling at Rodney in this super dark film, which I hadn't seen in a long time. Old friend Tom Sizemore recently passed away. Robert Downey Jr. is in there. Old friend Pruitt Taylor Vince, who was cut out of this film massively, plays one of the prison guards in the riot. Tommy Lee Jones is the warden, and one of the guards is Pruitt Taylor Vince, who has a stigmatism in his eye. I did 1 or 2 films with Pruitt Taylor Vince. You may know him as Lee Bowers in JFK, the guy up in the tower who testifies about the cars coming behind the picket fence, Eric, in the movie JFK. That's Pruitt Taylor Vince, who has this weird stigmatism in his eyes. They never stop moving, which is great for filmmakers because it looks like shit's going on. But he was in this film, and a bunch of other people, like an all-star cast that's so crazy with Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis, and Rodney, of all people. But
written by Tarantino.
Written by Tarantino, supposed to be directed by Tarantino. He had to do some other project. Oliver took it over, added stuff in, obviously, but he gets full screenwriting credit, Tarantino, for the script. So either he didn't challenge it, Oliver, or he let it be, because you need about a 50% change in a script to change authors, according to the Guild. But there was a guy, interestingly enough, there was a guy, Rodney had done all this stuff. He had done Caddyshack, he did Easy Money, he did Back to School, and he applies for membership in the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association, here in Hollywood, and they reject him. And you talk about not getting any respect. He's rejected because they said he wasn't a true actor. He was making believe he was an actor. And I mean, he's got credits up the kazoo. So anyway, the fans go crazy and they start writing to the MPA saying, "Are you insane?" So the guy who rejected him, this is unbelievable. The guy who officially rejected him was Roddy McDowall, who played a monkey in Planet of the Apes.
Really? Roddy McDowall did it?
Yeah, he was the president.
And he was about a character actor his damn self.
Right, but character acting is okay. They were saying Rodney was just doing these bit parts and not a real character actor. But to be rejected by a guy playing a monkey is kind of ironic. And then the overwhelming fan support changes his mind, and he apologizes, and Rodney tells him to go fuck himself. Doesn't want to be part of the Motion Picture Association, which really sums up Rodney in one incident. There's other stories we'll get into, but that was Rodney. But if you go back, and we'll go back to the beginning of the story, because people know Rodney as the Jay Leno, or, here's the matinee idol, Rodney. But people know him for being on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson 70 times, which is an insane amount of times to be on the Tonight Show. It got to the point where he didn't even come out and do stand-up. He just came and sat on the couch and did the routine with Johnny as the straight man. And some of that is so magical. We're going to try to show this on Locals. We can't show it on YouTube. If you want to come over after the show, we're going to start posting all of these rare Rodney clips on Locals. That's unstructured.locals.com for you people who are technically challenged. The other world over there's a photo of Rodney just killing Carson. There's a great story. There's so many great stories. He had a manager Rodney had a manager at one point. Didn't have a manager for a long time. He had a manager, wrote to Carson, and he couldn't get on the show, and he accused Carson of stealing Rodney's jokes, and he told Carson to go fuck himself. So he writes him this letter, this manager. So Carson reads it on the show, and the audience is just cracking up, going, "This is from Rodney Dangerfield's manager." So Rodney Dangerfield is just going, "Dude, how could you write this letter to Carson?" He goes, "I'm never getting on the show now." So he writes Carson a letter after that saying, you know what? Go fuck yourself. You embarrassed my manager on national TV. Fuck you. I mean, again, this is the self-destructiveness of Rodney. And one of the guys who had written for Rodney, had written jokes, ends up being on the Tonight Show as a producer and runs into Rodney later on. Rodney was at the Copa one night, and he goes outside, and in a car is Johnny Carson by himself. And he says, "I can't get it." Oh, it was for Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett. He knew Tony Bennett, Rodney. And Tony Bennett was performing at the Copa, and he goes outside, Rodney, to smoke a cigarette. There's Johnny Carson in a car. And he says, "What are you doing out here?" He says, "I can't get in. It's just sold out. It's insane. The line's around the block." So he's coming with me. And Rodney takes Johnny Carson through the famous kitchen scene replicated by Martin Scorsese in Goodfellas through the back door of the kitchen. If you remember how the whole one-shot scene in Goodfellas goes through the entire back kitchen of the Copa. That's what he does. This is way before Goodfellas, of course. That's how he takes Johnny Carson into the Copacabana and gets him a seat on the side to sit by himself and watch the show. And later on, Carson would become one of his biggest supporters, obviously, and stand with Rodney and drink with Rodney and get crazy with Rodney. And that's a story for another day. But starting out in Rodney's world and how he got like this, he was not a happy camper. His father and uncle were a team of vaudeville comedians named Peter Roy, I think his father was. Roy was the stage name. He was Jack Cohen is his real name, by the way, as people have figured out by now. Jacob Rodney Cohen was his full name. So his father and his uncle, his father's brother, were performers in vaudeville as a duo. Father left the family. They were born in Babylon, Long Island, right next door to Amityville. We used to play Babylon and baseball all the time. This is that his father or?
Yeah, Phil Cohen,
yeah,
his dad.
Phil Cohen. So his brother and the two of them are a vaudeville team. They leave the mother. The mother is a complete nasty, nasty woman. His whole life, she never hugged him. She never kissed him. She treated him like shit. He had another sister. Every birthday that went by, he never got a birthday card, never an acknowledgement of his report card. He had to start working at the age of 5. This is the Depression. He's born in 1921. So 1926, he's already working. And at the age of 5, Eric, delivering newspapers, he will work through the Depression trying to make a nickel. He meets a guy who tells him to come by his office every day for a nickel. So he gets molested by this guy, shows up just to get the nickel. The guy makes him sit on his lap and do these weird things to him, which I'm not going to get into here. A completely abusive childhood because he has no parental supervision. The mother couldn't give a shit. She's so embittered that the father left her. At one point, the kid, Rodney, saves up money. His mother says, "You should get a bank account." And he's got like 8 different jobs, Eric. I mean, he's got literally, at one point, he's like 13 driving a fish truck. I mean, the amount of work that this guy was doing is where the work ethic comes from for Rodney Dangerfield, also known as Jack Roy at this time. But he gets all these jobs, he gets this money. His mother says, "Why don't you open a bank account?" Puts all the money in a bank account all summer. By September, she steals all the money. And she said, "Why did you listen to me? Don't trust me." And it's just really sick shit from his mother. In fact, when he meets his first wife, she denounces he's dating this woman, which we're going to get into in a second. He's dating this woman, and the mother hates her guts because the mother realizes that if he gets married, he's going to move out and not support the mother anymore. And he doesn't know how to handle this, Rodney, because like he says, you only have one mother and there's nothing you can really compare it to. So he doesn't even think it's aberrational, which happened to me and other people I know. But at the age of 15, he's already writing jokes. He's already worshiping Henny Youngman. And the reason it's important is because it's a generational thing. Henny Youngman, who came up with the catchphrase, "Take my wife, please," while playing violin, is similar to what Rodney will come up with, "I don't get any respect." And this took a long time for Rodney to get that phrase. And he says that he didn't get that phrase until the 70s when The Godfather came out and people were mimicking the Don Corleone character about getting respect and showing respect. Everywhere you went, you heard about not getting respect because of The Godfather, the movie and the book. And that's where he got it from. But he worshiped Henny Youngman. And, I used to go to the Friars Club with Jackie the Joke Man, and we'd hang out. And Jackie had written all these jokes. I was Jackie the Joke Man, Jackie Martling. And Henny Youngman used to be there. And Henny Youngman, his wife, was on life support at the time. And we became friends with Henny Youngman. He came back to my office at National Lampoon after lunch, and he started sobbing. And I remember this. I'll never forget this. He was a big guy. And he was standing in my doorway. I don't even know why he came with me, but he came back to my office at National Lampoon, and he's standing in the doorway crying. And he says, Mark, my entire life, comedy wise, I've said, take my wife, please. And now I wish that God would. And I was like, holy crap. Because she was on life support. And eventually he had to pull the plug. And that's what he was going through. But the reason I mentioned this, not because of that story, was because he, at the age of 15, Rodney worships him as this machine gun Borscht Belt comic. And this is really in the weeds about comedy, but post World War II, the center of the universe in comedy is in these 3 hotels in upstate New York, the Borscht Belt, which is the Nevele, Grossinger's, and the Concord. And those were the 3 mega hotels. There was the Browns. I mean, Jerry Lewis went to the Browns, but the 3 mega hotels were the Nevele and Concord, and the Borscht Belt. King was Grossinger's, and they jockey back and forth. But the Nevele was 11 spelled backwards, and 11 was for it's odd little trivia. I don't even know why this even matters, except to someone like myself who's a psychopath. But the 11 was found. There was like a waterfalls there found by 11 teachers in 1908, and they called the waterfalls the Nevele because there was 11 teachers. The hotel, and why it's relevant to me, was owned by the Slutsky brothers. The Slutsky brothers will later own Hunter Mountain, and I will go to work for them. If you want to see that episode of Ski Shop, that features a lot of the information about the Slutsky brothers. Izzy and his father and Orville owned the Nevele Hotel. Izzy and his father will eventually be convicted of tax evasion and go to Sing Sing for a year. Even though they would then own Hunter Mountain and become multimillionaires with the hotel itself. The judge in the case was screaming at them from the bench saying, you were the 2 greediest millionaires I've ever met in my life, and sentenced them to prison for, intentionally avoiding paying income taxes, which they didn't look at as a benefit back in those days. So this is who Rodney Dangerfield goes to work for, and you got to live there. You got room and board. You stayed for the summer. You got, I don't know, $15 to $50 a week, back in the day, or probably 15. And that's where these guys like Henny Youngman were doing their thing. And nobody wants to book the guy. And he goes around at the age of 15, and he's writing these jokes and he's selling them like a lot of these guys did, because where are you going to go at 15? He doesn't have a car. I mean, it's just crazy. How do you get out of Babylon, Long Island? But he tries to get a manager, and he does all these wonderfully tricky things that if you ever want to see how crazy a show business career is, and how random it is, and how luck is involved, and how all this stuff. That's why when people see some successful guy in show business, they go, hey, how do I do this? It's a million weird things that this guy had to do to become the Rodney Dangerfield that we know from Caddyshack. And there is no root to it. There is no root. Now, and I'll get into that, because he at one point, after he's doing these gigs and he's operating as Jack Roy, no one really knows he's actually working as Jack Roy. He to get a manager, nobody will hire him because he's an unknown 17-year-old kid. So he says, I'll go around with you. This is probably a little later on, but he says, I'll go around with you while you make your rounds and see how this goes. So he goes around with the manager, and, somebody doesn't show up. He says, let me go up there. And the guy goes, no, you'll embarrass me. And these managers just reject him. And finally, by hanging on tenaciously to these different managers, somebody doesn't show up for a gig, and he goes and gets up for 5 minutes. That's what he had to do. Eventually he will go to Pips in Brooklyn, but that's years later with Pips. But the early clubs on the island, he's trying to get up and do 5 minutes. I mean, comedy clubs do not become a big thing until the 70s, Eric. You know what I mean? He opens Dangerfields in 1969, but I'll get into the reasons behind that. That was really the first comedy club in America in terms of just straight up stand up. And that there'll be, after that, Catch Rising Stars, the Improv, all spun off of Dangerfields. But he meets a girl, and she is a lounge singer, a torch singer, a pretty famous singer herself, named Joyce Indig. And Joyce Indig was a knockout, and he marries Joyce Indig in 1951, and the two of them agree to quit show business together. There she is right there. She gives up her career and he gives up his career because they want to have kids and raise a family. So they have kids, and for 12 years, he goes around New Jersey as a shingleman, or somebody says Tin Men is a movie with DeVito, I think. But shingleman is what these comedians and show business people did for a straight job. You'd go to a guy's house and you'd convince him that he needs aluminum siding, Eric. Or he needs, in my case, Groubert's Gorgeous Gutters of Grand Gorge. That was my shingleman hustle. So they would do this thing where you need aluminum siding. He'd have a little mini crew of out of work comics and actors, and they'd be in Manhattan, but they go to suburban regions like over across to New Jersey in some guy's car, and they would say you need aluminum siding, and they do the work. They actually did it. I don't know how good it was. I mean, at one point we were sliding off a snowy roof in Tannersville, New York, trying to put up gutters and leaders way into October, trying to make money. But anyway, his first attempt at this, he does this thing of aluminum siding for 12 years and quits show business. And the whole 12 years, he's writing jokes and throwing them into a duffel bag. And by the end of 12 years, he's got thousands of jokes in a duffel bag, literally. But of course, Rodney gets arrested for tax evasion, and he's sentenced to tax evasion fraud. He's put on parole because he starts his company, and he's evading paying taxes. So he gets divorced from his wife in 1961. He will remarry her again in 1963. It's one of these deals. He's married from 51 to 61 to Joyce. This is really weird. He has the two kids. The two kids, I think, are still alive. Melanie and Brian. I think one of them lives in Florida. The other one lives in New York somewhere. Two, adult children now. But the two kids that he has, the wife, Joyce, has some kind of debilitating arthritis, as best I can say. And at the age of 49, she dies of arthritis. And it's a little sketchy as to how she died, why she died, but apparently the arthritis was so debilitating that she died at the age of 49. If that makes any sense, maybe there was underlying causes. I'm not really sure what happened, but
I think alcoholism was involved too.
It might have been
dealing with that, and he was going up while she was going down at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is using drugs. Now, keep in mind, for 60 years. By his own admission, every day of his life, he smokes weed. And he's turned on to it by a black jazz trio. And they turn him on. He turns them on. And it's also this avoidance of trying not to drink, which a lot of people do when you're an alcoholic, which is what he is. So he switches. Everybody I know, not even non-celebrities, or celebrities I know who can't drink anymore, switch to pot. But it's never really that satisfying. He goes through a cocaine phase. I mean, but nevertheless, the guy's life is a train wreck, health-wise, food-wise, drug-wise, alcohol-wise. But that's the world. That's the world of these comics at that time. He has to work what he calls these toilets, and he hears on a Jack Benny. He worships Jack Benny too, who was a huge megastar at the time on radio. And one of the characters in the Jack Benny radio show is a guy named Dangerfield, and he steals the name. And he comes back as Rodney Dangerfield from being Jack Roy. Because of 12 years, he figures nobody's going to remember him anyway, which is absolutely true. So he comes back as Rodney Dangerfield, this made-up name that he kind of steals. He later tells Jack Benny. Benny knew where he got it from because they had radio scripts back in the day, and they wrote these scripts for NBC or whatever channel he was on. But his original phrase was "nothing goes right." This is before he had "I don't get no respect." So he was trying out these things. He also comes up with this: "Give me one of these." That becomes Rodney's handle. He needs one of these. You're okay, and it looks like one of these white supremacy things, which I found to be interesting. But in 1969, there it is. Yeah, he comes up with that at the end of each show. He goes, "If you see me, give me one of those."
Yeah, I think. Rodney was his middle name, so he snagged the Dangerfield and took his middle name.
Yeah. But Dangerfield was a recurring character in these Jack Benny episodes. he will claim that someone else gave him the name because there's various conflicting stories. I mean, the story I had heard originally was he was working in a paint shop. He worked in a paint store too in Babylon, Long Island, a physical paint store. And he was so fed up one day, he got up on the counter, pulled his pants down, and hung a moon at the customers and stormed out and quit the job. I mean, that was a legendary story. I don't know if that's true, but that's what everybody heard back in the day in the 80s, that Rodney worked in a paint store in Long Island, you know, but he was also doing this aluminum siding thing. So in 1966, I think it is, he gets a chance to be on a show with Ed Sullivan. And the Ed Sullivan Show really puts him on the map. That he comes back and does that multiple times. He auditions. It's March 5th, 1966, and he's paid. He's completely broke. Now keep this in mind. He's paid for this one, 5-minute stand-up routine, $1,000. That's $10,000 right today, Eric. He comes back in 2 weeks for $1,500, the equivalent of $15,000 today in modern money. And, you know, that pays his bills and everything else. And he, you know, does a bunch of these things with Ed Sullivan, but that gets him onto the Merv Griffin show. That'll get him on the Tonight Show. That gets him onto these different shows, because Ed Sullivan was really what made or broke you back then, because you had to go on and perform. There's Jackie Gleason. The real thing that he did the most of was the Dean Martin show. And this is really weird, because he gets a call to do these sketches with Dean Martin, and Dean Martin is so big. Okay, this is hard to explain. He flies out to the coast and he does this thing where the whole thing is him sitting in a bar with Dean Martin just telling jokes. It's just like with him with Johnny Carson, right? But Dean Martin's just sitting there as a straight man. The only problem is Dean Martin's not there. That's an empty chair. They edit, They edit in. Dean Martin was so big, he refused to show up for the sketch itself. So Rodney had to sit in that chair with nobody there.
Not even a producer?
Not even a producer. There's nobody here. Who am I talking to? I'm talking to strangers here. Hey, Dean, where the hell's Dean Martin? He'll use Dean Martin for the Dean in Back to School, by the way. That's the name of, what's his name? Who was in Deliverance. Who plays the Dean. He calls him Dean Martin in Back to School. Back to School, by the way, later on, they'll try to develop his wife, his second wife, who, when he dies, his second wife tries to develop Back to School with the help of MGM, apparently, wherever the movie producer was, or studio was on Back to School, to do the first reality show ever made, or one of the early reality shows, where the parents would go back to school with their kids in a unscripted reality show, Eric, that I don't think was ever made, called Back to School, which is kind of weird, but she sold it as a show. He was so involved in show business near the end of movie business, and near the end of his career, I wore this is a tribute today to Rodney. This is what Rodney wore every single show he ever did. He wore a blue suit, white shirt, red tie. In fact, this is donated to the Smithsonian, where you could see the white shirt and red tie of Rodney Dangerfield at the Smithsonian. And when he donated, right next to it was Lindbergh's plane. And he's going, hey, what are you going to do? Wipe the windshield with my shirt? What do you need this for? You know, and anyway, so that's how big Rodney got. So his outfit, which I'm commemorating today.
Didn't he say that was an accident, that he just didn't have anything? And he's like, what am I
going to wear?
He
didn't care. He was kind of a schlub. He didn't care. Right. He didn't care about clothing. He was just like a schlub. And, you know, he had the same shirt and tie and suit. You know, he just bought the same thing. He didn't really care. He was stoned half the time. But in 66, when he gets the Sullivan Show, now back up. I just got to back up, because there's a guy in 1942. He meets a guy named Joe Ansis. And Joe Ansis, I just got to digress, because this is going to be a link to a future show. There's a link between Rodney Dangerfield and Lenny Bruce. And the link is this guy, Joe Ansis. Joe Ansis lived with Rodney for 20 years. Joe Ansis was considered the funniest guy in New York, but he had so much OCD and so many germophobic things that he would never go on stage. Joe Ansis, and Roseanne Barr says the same thing. Roseanne Barr knows who Joe Ansis is. Every comedian who knows anything about anything, Robin Williams, Richard Lewis, Everybody knows who Joe Ancis was. And Joe Ancis was Rodney's best friend, and they lived together. Even here in Mid-Wilshire, when he moved to LA, he supported Joe Ancis his entire life. Joe Ancis never worked a day in his life. That's how funny Joe Ancis was. But he wouldn't perform because he had too many phobias. And Joe Ancis was revered by both Lord Buckley and Lenny Bruce. The link between Dangerfield, and when we do the episode on Lenny Bruce, we'll get back into Joe Ancis. The link between the two is Joe Ancis. And he had first met Lenny, Rodney did, in 1942 before the war, when he was working with his mother, Sally Marr, doing impersonations. He will later, Rodney, work with a guy named, it's kind of funny. Maybe there's a picture you could show of this guy. A guy who was on Mad TV and used to do impersonations, a Canadian comic, and he will hire this guy. Oh, yeah, there he is. Wow, why does he have the shaved head? Wow, that's kind of weird. He will hire this guy here from Toronto to open for him for 2 years, and he's bombing for 2 years. And Rodney is the only guy laughing. He's laughing off stage, and he supports him for 2 years, having him open for him in Vegas and on the road and everything. And he knows that someday this guy is going to make it big. And he is one of a legion of people that Rodney discovers and makes into stars. And you say, well, how could he make them into stars? Rodney had an open-ended deal with HBO. And every year he had a show called Rodney Dangerfield's Young Comedians of HBO. And for the first time, he put them on HBO. And that included Jerry Seinfeld. That included Sam Kinison. That included this gentleman here. It included, like I said, Robin. I mean, not Bellucci, but at all kinds of stand-ups. What's his name? From Tim Allen.
Tim Allen, yeah.
Yeah. Some women who came on. He had the deal that he had with HBO allowed him complete control of who he picked. And the show was filmed at Dangerfields, of course, on the Upper East Side in 1969, as they said when he opened it. But these shows, 1983, 1984, 1985, there's Kinison, I guess, with Charlie Sheen. Kinison will develop probably the closest relationship with him because he will then be in Back to School. He loved Kinison. And Kinison, these guys did not have the style that Rodney had. None of these guys were Borscht Belt comics. They were all observational humor comics like Seinfeld and Kinison. And Kinison did not want to do the show because Kinison said it took him like 40 minutes to get warmed up in any show that he did. And Rodney says, look, you don't need 40 minutes, pal. You could just come in. There's Robin, Tim Allen, Lovitz, obviously. And who is that on the left? That's
Bob
Saget. Yeah, it was
Saget.
another guy. Another guy he broke was Bob Saget. Robin, you don't hear that much about. I think that he was worried that Robin would steal his jokes. And because Robin was a joke teller. Before he got into improvisational long things, Robin had a legendary, was known to steal jokes. And Rodney was a joke writer. Obviously, people would write jokes and you could sell them to Rodney. Rodney would buy them from you. But for the most part, he was a machine. And he broke Dice, of course, at Pips in Brooklyn and later on this HBO thing. The first time you see Dice is on this HBO special. So I think the two biggest guys that he broke were really Kinison and Dice. And, those are two big stars. I mean, he said, I'll have you pay, if you do this show on HBO, to Kinison, he said, I'll have you playing 2,000 seaters in no time. He said, I was completely wrong. He was playing sold out Madison Square Garden to 16,000, 18,000 seaters. This is from Back to School. This is a movie that he did, this was after he did Caddyshack. Back to School becomes, I think it's 1986. Some guy named Alan Mader was the director, and Harold Ramis was one of the writers on it. Ramis, of course, is the Back to School. It's a story of the wealthy guy. This was on the rewrite. Harold Ramis suggests on the rewrite of the script that you're a millionaire who goes back to school. Right. That was Ramis.
That was brilliant, though.
Because that was Ramis's addition to the script. Now, Brian Doyle Murray, Ramis, and Doug Kenny together will write Caddyshack in 1980. That's where Rodney really begins to get known for Caddyshack with Ted Knight and Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Brian Doyle Murray as the leader of the caddies, and Chevy Chase, and there's the Rodney wealthy Cervic or whatever his name was in 1980. That makes a fortune. And he's fighting with Ted Knight all the time from Mary Tyler Moore, which is a great turn, probably the same character, pretty close to it. But Caddyshack is a follow-up by Doug Kenny to Animal House. And to Doug Kenny, it was a failure. Doug Kenny, the movie was critically slammed, made a lot of money, but it was critically slammed, Caddyshack. And Doug Kenny took it personally and may or may not have jumped off a cliff in Hawaii to kill himself because of Caddyshack. I think it was there's Bellucci. I think that's Judy Bellucci, if possibly on the other side of him. But he said that nobody partied harder than me, other than John Bellucci, famously. But I don't know if he hung that much with Bellucci at that time. But the group that was making Caddyshack was really the spin-off group from Animal House, and you know, he'll go to Hawaii. This is Doug Kenny, of course, who is one of my idols. He was the founder of National Lampoon. Becomes such a coke addicted maniac that he either jumped or fell off a cliff in Hawaii. And the great line about it is Harold Ramis said he probably slipped off the cliff while looking for a good place to jump. And I mean, you talk about a Lampoon line. Just, I mean, you talk about nailing dark humor.
Ramis
is unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, you'll see Ramis, of course, you know, with Bill Murray and Stripes, which I highly recommend. You know, I recommend all these films. I mean,
Groundhog Day. He created
Groundhog Day. I mean, but this is his first directorial debut in Caddyshack. And it's a little rough. It's not The Godfather, I'll tell you that much. You know,
it holds up. It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, but quickly he does 83. He follows up with a film called Easy Money with Joe Pesci, which is shot completely on Staten Island about a guy running a baby photography service. And that has a lot. He wrote that also. This is Rodney writing all these. He wrote it. One of the co-writers on it, oddly enough, was a guy. 1983 will be fired right before I get there in 85, named P.J. O'Rourke, the famous conservative satirist. So he was one of the writers on Easy Money, which Joe Pesci is just hysterical in this, as is another guy known, Jeff Jones, who plays the owner of Monahan's department store. The matriarch dies, and Rodney can inherit through his wife Monahan's department store, which is a Macy's in the movie. But things go crazy. But Jeff Jones is in it, and there's just so much homophobic jokes, Eric. I was like watching it the other day. It's like, whoa. I mean, it's a lot of cringy jokes in there. But around that same time, before I was at Lampoon, it was 1983. I was not an editor yet, and my other two friends who would become editors were not editors yet, but we were hanging out with the editors a lot. And Brian McConaughey, tip of the hat to Brian McConaughey, who's got a bit part in Caddyshack, passed away this week, one of the great Lampoon editors, a guy that I respected. Brian McConaughey was close to Rodney, and Tony Hendra was one of these guys, and we revered these. We were younger, but we revered these Lampoon editors in the early 80s, and we would go to Dangerfields with them. And I'll just tell you this now because it reminds me about 1983, 84, I presume, because I wasn't at Lampoon yet. So he had a booth for us in the back, Rodney, and it was the Lampoon booth, a round booth in the back, and we'd sit in this booth with these Lampoon editors and watch Rodney do his show. And, you know, the first time seeing him, you're just, you know, you can't believe what you're seeing. This machine gun of comedy coming out nonstop, 1,000 jokes a minute, just destroying the room. And I'm just sitting there going, holy crap, I've never seen anything like this. Because at that time, Borscht Bell comedy was not really in vogue, Eric. You know what I mean? It was like long gone. I mean, the Buddy Hackett's, I mean, it was kind of a revival going on, but this was the middle of the 80s. And with these movies, Rodney kind of came back into the fold, as did Shecky Green, as did Buddy Hackett, as did a lot of these guys who were dinosaurs of Borscht Belt comedy. And to see Rodney do that in his club was unbelievable. So anyway, he does like a full set, and he starts talking to us, and he says, "Come on down to the bathroom." And we said, "Why do we have to go to the bathroom?" And he says, "My niece, who opened for him, who was singing, got to keep his dressing room. So he didn't have a dressing room in his own club. So he used the men's room as his dressing room. And the men's room was pretty big. So he goes after the show down in the men's room to hold court, and we go down with him into the men's room. Now people are coming in to use the men's room, and there's Rodney doing a second show literally in the men's room, and just killing down there in the bathroom. But he has nowhere to go in his own club. There's no dressing room. So we're in the men's room with him, and outside the men's room door was a payphone right on the wall. And he hears a woman putting in $1 million quarters to call long distance call. Back then you had to put in all that change, and he just hears it in the back of his mind. He just hear this woman, and it's like, connect to California, person to person, blah blah blah, chucking in quarters. And she gets her party on the line, and he sticks his arm out the bathroom door, and he pushes down the receiver, and the woman goes batshit crazy. And he opens the door, and she doesn't know what to make of it. And she's screaming at him, and he's going, "Hey, you want to fight? Come on in. I got a bunch of men in here. Come on, lady, let's go." And we're just crying, Eric. I mean, it was I'll never forget this as long as I live. The woman's face, she didn't know what to make of it. There's the owner of the club telling her to come in the men's room and fight her after putting down the lever on a phone call that she put 100 quarters into. Anyway, we'd gone to Rodney's a bunch of times, but that was my first experience of actually hanging with Rodney Dangerfield in his own club. And Brian McConaughey, I think, was there. Like I said, recently passed away. But anyway, so he is at the peak of his game in the 80s because of this stuff, and will move to LA. He will do the Tonight Show a lot. He will start working on different films, like I said, Natural Born Killers and things like that. But like I said, he would take these guys under his wing because he gave back to the community. That's how Jim Carrey remembers him. Jim Carrey, just one of the biggest supporters. He starts to shoot commercials, Rodney. In 1970, he'll do the light beer, the Miller Lite series that we all know, with all those celebrities, ex-football players. I mean, that really puts him into another stratosphere, those Miller Lite beer commercials, Eric. Yeah, here's a photo from one of them. I think it might be Lyle Alzado and some other Rams and Deacon Jones and some other people. But he does a commercial. He gets contacted by AT&T, and they want him to do a commercial. Come back to AT&T. You get plenty of respect from AT&T. They're calling people to come back to AT&T. And Rodney says, I don't know. And they cancel it. They do it. They cancel it. Finally, they shoot the commercial. They pay him the money. And about 2 weeks after it airs, they pull the commercial. And he calls him up and says, what happened? He says, our stockholders freaked out. It was like so uncouth what you were doing. It was beneath AT&T's dignity. And he's going, all right, go whatever. Go fuck yourself. Okay, I think I need AT&T. I need you like a hole in the head, right? So he got paid, whatever. They pulled the commercial, and they told him there was no dignity in what he was doing. A week later, they got a new guy, Carrot Top.
Well, then they moved on to props.
Yeah. So he gets a call to the circus. Ringling Brothers is at Madison Square Garden, and they tell him that various celebrities, when the circus opens, are asked, and it's a great tribute to your celebrityhood, to ride an elephant into Madison Square Garden with the circus. And he's, well, I don't see myself on an elephant. I mean, look, I don't get no respect as it is, let alone an elephant. So they talk him into it, and Rodney's on this elephant. And from the second he's on the elephant, he can't really get centered on the elephant. And he begins to slide off the elephant, and he's hanging underneath with his foot in the stirrup, being dragged in the dirt by the elephant. And the people in the stands think it's an act, and they're laughing at him, and he's being ripped up the elephant's just about to crush his head when these clowns come out and unhook him from the stirrup underneath the elephant. And he's going, never doing that again. You can't trust any circus animals. I ain't working with kids or elephants. And he almost dies getting killed by this elephant, which is kind of weird. So yeah, he did, like, you know, all of the weird things you did in show business, because he, like I said, he came from poverty and he never thought he'd ever get to keep any of this money. You know what I mean? Like, he was so, if you grew up, which I did, obviously our parents did, or your grandparents did, grew up in the Depression, there was a different reverence of money than we have, or I have today, than they had back then. And they did it out of fear, you know. And you know, my father would go around the house all the time turning out the lights, going, Dad, I mean, you got to stop. No, we didn't have anything in the Depression. We didn't even have lights. I had a candle and a dream, and we had to start a fire in the woods to read a book. You know, they just tell you these insane stories. You know,
we still hear, what are you going to be feeding Vepco? I mean, we actually have that. Anytime the lights are on, it's like we're funding the whole electric company.
Right. But that, you know, he another guy that he really supported was Adam Sandler. He really liked Adam Sandler, and Sandler, that's how he got these jobs, you know, in showbiz, movie jobs, because he called him up to be Lucifer in Little Nicky. I think he plays Satan, his father, in Little Nicky, if I remember this. And then he ends up playing. There's Sandler. He really loved Sandler a lot because they were both Jewish. Sandler, he said, had a caricature. One thing he loved about Sandler created this loser caricature of himself that was not like Adam Sandler. Rodney Dangerfield was not like Rodney Dangerfield, the caricature. And I've said this before many times. Andrew Dice Clay was not Andrew Dice Clay. He was Andrew Silverstein, who I knew was Andrew Silverstein. These are caricatures. And that's, I think, where Trump got his caricature, was from Dice and from the World Wrestling Federation character that Trump had created to be an evil guy on the World Wrestling Federation. If you look at that, when he's friends with the head of the World Wrestling
Somebody agrees with you. Larry
Okay.
Elder actually did a comparison with Trump and Rodney Dangerfield, and this is in 2016. He said, this is why Trump's getting elected, because everyone can relate to him.
Well, the relatability factor, I'm talking about the creation of a character, and Trump creates this character, and he's not like that in real life, and Rodney wasn't like that in real life, and Dice wasn't like that in real life, but people find it hard to believe. I don't know why. Maybe they're not in show business. Nora Dunn from Saturday Night Live famously storms off the set when Andrew Dice Clay is asked to be the host, thinking it's a real character. And I'm going, like, she's an actress, for Christ's sake. Even she doesn't get it. You know, I was backstage with Dice's family at Madison Square Garden, where he sold out in 19,000 seat thing. And he comes through the door into the green room, and I'm with his parents, the Silversteins, who grew up around the corner from me in Sheepshead Bay. And he literally changes in midair from Dice to Andrew Silverstein in front of his parents. And to see that transition, you get to see an actor working his craft and stripping off the character. And he liked that about Sandler, that Sandler had created this caricature of himself out of thin air and maintained it. And there's another guy that he revered, who he got to open for him, who he took a lot of shit for, named Andy Kaufman. And nobody got at the beginning what Kaufman was freaking doing except Rodney Dangerfield, and kept supporting Andy Kaufman until people finally got Andy Kaufman. You know, the manager, Andy Kaufman, came out, his evil lounge lizard act, and Rodney was like, oh, holy crap, this guy's got other characters. It's like he would come out and do a set, and it just blew Rodney away, because Rodney was a meat and potatoes, Borscht Belt, machine gun, Henny Youngman, take my wife, I don't get no respect comic. And he never had this in his life. He never had this and never could pull it off. Lenny pulled it off. Lenny started out like Jim Carrey doing impressions, and then migrated into these long improvisational stories, Christ and Moses, Thank You Masked Man, Tits and Ass, whatever you want to look at. And we'll get into the Lenny Bruce episode. But Rodney could never do that. And he revered guys who could do that. Seinfeld was more of an observational comic with a storytelling line. But Rodney had that ability to write nonstop, set up punchline jokes. I don't know how to do it. I'll tell you right now, I don't know how he does it. You know, I mean, there's jokes that Rodney comes up with that are almost, you know, perfect in their little I just crack up reading these. This is, no wonder I got no confidence in my looks. On Halloween, my parents sent me out, as is. Even in my dreams, I didn't get no respect. Once I dreamt I was kidnapped. The ransom note said, pay us $5,000 and you'll see your kid again. You know, I mean, these are little tiny haiku masterpieces of Borscht Belt comedy. Even in the park, I had no friends. I'll never forget the seesaw. I had to keep running from one end to the other. You know, once I told my old man, nobody likes me. He said, don't say that. Everybody hasn't met you yet. They're brilliant. One time I got lost. A cop helped me look for my parents. I said, do you think we'll find them? And he said, I don't know, kid. There's so many places they could hide. You know, we used to do these nonstop in the 80s. We would just greet each other with like 10 Rodney jokes in a row. Coney Island, my old man wouldn't let me on the roller coaster. I said, Pop, let me go. I'm telling you, it's safe. He goes, I know. Try the parachute jump. I played hide and seek. They wouldn't even look for me. Once I had a fever, they put a thermometer in my mouth, and my old man said, all right, kid, bite down hard. When I was little, my old man loaned me money to buy a rattle. When I was a baby, they bought me a carriage with no brakes. I went to a hypnotist to stop smoking. He put me to sleep. When I woke up, he stole my cigarettes. I mean, these self-deprecating jokes created this persona of Rodney Dangerfield, and that persona became a national obsession and a national worship of Rodney, because the average Joe felt like Rodney Dangerfield. And that was the link to Rodney Dangerfield, was the fact that people felt beaten down. They felt that they didn't get any respect. And that's why they'd come up to him, and that's why he was revered. And in fact, he was correct. He had tapped into something by accident that nobody could ever see in a million years. I mean, if you look at those machine gun sit-down attempts with Jay Leno earlier with Carson, a lot more with Carson than Jay Leno. Jay Leno worshipped Rodney Dangerfield. Nobody cared more about Rodney than Jay Leno. And in fact, there's a great story that Jay Leno talks about, because Rodney will get into have these health issues, you know, in the early 2000s. And he will have open heart surgery. They're looking for an aneurysm. They took his insides out. They put it on the table. They sewed him back up. I mean, it was a wreck. He was in a coma for a month. And
I have the story if you wanted to.
Well, I'm going to tell you the story right now, because Jay Leno, along with others, shows up at the hospital, and he says to his wife, Rodney's new wife, who we'll get into in a second, who was Joan Child. I don't know if you want. Do you have a picture of Rodney's wife, by the way? The second wife. He meets this woman in a flower shop. There's the second wife. That's Joan Child. She's a Mormon. She runs a flower shop in Santa Monica, right by the pier. And he gets married to her. They stay married until his death. She will have his sweat in a test tube in the refrigerator after he's dead. I don't even know what that means. But when Rodney was in a coma after he had the brain surgery and open heart surgery, Jay Leno showed up, and that woman, Joan, his wife, said, he can hear you, Jay. This is the marriage. She was gorgeous. I mean, she was, I think, in her 40s, but she looked like she was in her early 30s, but I think she's in her mid 40s there. Anyway, so she says to Jay Leno, he can hear you. And she says, Jay Leno's here, Rodney. And Jay Leno says, take my finger, Rodney, and squeeze it. So Rodney squeezes Jay Leno's finger, and he keeps saying to Rodney, if you can feel my finger, show me a sign, like move your eyebrows or a head or whatever. And there's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And Jay Leno says, that's okay, Rodney. It's not really my finger. And he goes like this in a coma, like laughing in a coma. And Jay Leno talked about that story, I think, later on, you know, that it was not his finger, which is a great line.
Yeah, I have the clip if you wanted to see it, but that's cool.
Anyway, so yeah, he begins to have these health issues and multiple surgeries, and eventually he has the open heart surgery in 2004, and people are showing up. Literally, he has brain surgery. It's here at St. Joseph's in Santa Monica. He has brain surgery, so there'll be enough blood flow to have heart surgery. You know, I mean, this is a strange thing, but it kind of works for a while. But he goes on for his 80th birthday. I don't know if you have that photo going on Leno. Jim Carrey's there, and they surprise him with this cake. This is the 80th birthday on The Tonight Show, and he gets up to do a little routine, and Jay Leno realizes that he's having a heart attack, and he interrupts this show, and they take him to the hospital directly from the Tonight Show, Rodney. And he comes back a year later. He survives. This was his 80th. He survives yet another year, comes back and takes a cake for his 81st birthday. This guy wouldn't call it quits. And he begins to slowly decline in health at that time. But yeah, maybe we could run that clip of Leno. Let's see what it says.
All right, hang on.
I look at Rodney's lying with his eyes open, but he can't do it.
Oh.
And Jones says, doctor said he can hear us, but he can't respond. So I'm telling him how much we love him, how great he was to all his comics.
Right.
So Jones says to me, Jay, put your finger in Rodney's hand. She goes, Rodney, if you know it's Jay, try and squeeze his finger. So I put my finger in his hand. I feel like just a slight squeeze. And I went, Rodney, that's not my finger. Right. And I said,
It's a great line.
He moved. Yeah, and and so he died right after that. But to get
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, he'll still be making movies. He makes a movie called My Five Wives in 2000 about his wife marrying a Mormon wife who's his wife. He makes a movie called The Fourth Tenor in 2002. He's banking and putting this money in the bank for his kids and for his wife. He continues to make movies. Some of them I've never even seen. I don't even know if they were released. But he buys one of his jokes was one of his jokes at the time. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. In I think it's 2000 in 1995, he is the first celebrity to have his own website. And on the website, with his own merch and his own jokes, it was like Rodney.com or whatever it was. He was the first celebrity to have his own website and put up original material on there. And one of the things he puts up, this is right before he died, was a joke that he had told. He said, I bought a plot in a cemetery, and the cemetery director said, there goes the neighborhood. And that joke was on the website the day he died. So his wife put it on the tombstone, and it's on his tombstone now to this day in Westwood, over here where he lived. And there it is. There goes the neighborhood. That was a joke on his website the day before, the day he died, and his wife put it there. He has a ceremony for his service led by Farrah Fawcett, of all people. I don't know what Farrah Fawcett's connection was, where they released monarch butterflies into the air, and they had a skywriter flying over with skywriting with a giant word in the sky that just said respect. And Rodney finally got the respect upon his demise that he'd been seeking his entire life. And there it was spelled out over the Pacific Ocean during this ceremony led by Farrah Fawcett, releasing these monarch butterflies. And, I mean, the guy is a legend for a reason. I mean, but what a brutal life, what a battle that this guy, he was born on a strange date, November 22nd, in 1921. And on November 22nd, 2001, by the way, which you showed the photo of on the Tonight Show, he has that heart attack. That was November 22nd, that photo with him getting the cake.
Lord.
Yeah. So he has the heart attack. And in the hospital, he's laying in bed smoking weed. And the security, it goes all the way down the hall immediately because of the circulation in the hospital is unbelievable. And the guards show up going, are you smoking pot? And they realize it's Rodney Dangerfield. And they go, all right, never mind. And they just let it go. And he's smoking weed in the hospital room. I mean, it's just crazy. But I mean, he gets pulled over, and they have the cops pull him over for speeding. And he was casting in his mid-Wilshire apartment, luxury apartment building on Wilshire Boulevard in Century City. He was casting for, I think it was Back to School, actresses to play hookers. And in the lobby downstairs are about 20 actresses dressed as hookers. And the people in the building have a heart attack because he just moved in. It's obviously for this scene or something. And they start complaining that he's got hookers in the lobby, and he had to explain to him, his wife had to explain, no, I'm casting a movie. And they never really believed him because on many occasions he did have hookers in the lobby. So I can see why.
That is funny.
And yeah, this is the actual, which I used to have one of these. This is the actual cocktail napkin from Dangerfields in New York. I don't get no respect. I don't know if you have some other photos that we could just roll through here of various celebrities with him. Let me see what you got there. You could just run them all. I mean, there he is with Elvis. They had some weird conversation where each one of them said, "Hey, man, how's it going? Hey, how's it going?"
By the way, this is his father with Charlie Chaplin. It didn't come up earlier, but I thought it was really all cool.
Right.
Yeah. We saw Gleason, obviously, Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
I love his dress code over time.
Yeah, that's how he dressed. That's how he dressed. He would pull up and he wouldn't drive. His wife would drive, and he'd get out of the car on the passenger side. There was a doorman at his building. And he said that to be comfortable, I'd unzip my pants and loosen my belt while my wife was driving. So he'd get out of the car and he'd zip up his fly and buckle his pants. So what is a normal person supposed to think when they see that of this guy who pulls up in front of his house all the time doing that? That there was some shenanigans going on in the car, you know?
Well, he's rumored to have worn a bathrobe all the time with nothing underneath and very liberal with visibility with folks.
Did it all the time. Sometimes didn't even wear the bathrobe. The bathrobe was when he got dressed for guests who might be. No, I'm not even kidding. The bathrobe was when he, like if some writer from Time magazine was coming over, he'd wear the bathrobe with the front open. He never even put clothes on. The bathrobe was extra. I mean, the guy was, a hedonist.
Anyway, that stood out. Let me see. We've got Steve Martin with them.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, he put Steve Martin up first. Yeah.
And then Charlie and Sam.
The Sam stuff. I mean, that back to school. This scene right here is the whole movie. It's worth the price of admission for back to school. He talks about Vietnam and being in the boonies and fighting Charlie. This is his wedding, obviously, to the Mormon Joan Child, who will stay with him from 1993, and I guess it's 10, 11 years till he died.
Yeah, he was married to his first wife for
twice,
a long time.
Yeah. There's Dangerfields, the club. Yeah, like I said, just so you know, when his wife dies, the two kids are motherless. So he gives up his career and opens Dangerfields, cost him $250,000 to open Dangerfields so he could be the father to the two children and not go on the road. This is the two children grown up, Melanie and Brian, but he literally gives up the road, gives up tons of money, gives up Vegas, gives up everything so he can be in New York and be a parent to these two children who don't have a mother.
This is after he already lost his whole career, had to quit, barely got it back, and then he kind of quits again by doing the club.
Because he can't go on the road. He can't do Vegas. He can't do L.A. He has to work for peanuts, literally, in his own club. And people are telling him, look, I could get you a lot of money. They want to meet with you from this talent agency. And he goes, no, I can't leave New York. I got to do this. I got to feed these kids. Not that he was broke, but he just couldn't leave the kids.
No, it's really impressive too, and he didn't seem to be that greedy about money because, like
he wasn't. He really
with Caddyshack, I think that he took a $35,000 flat rate for the movie and had 2 or 3 Vegas gigs at $50,000 a pop. So he actually lost a ton of money doing Caddyshack.
Dude, he supported Joe Ancis until Joe Ancis died in 2001. The guy lived with him for free for 20 years. So, I mean, really, really a guy that people loved, in show business itself. You know what I mean? People revered him.
I think you wanted to talk about him, or he's somehow coming up. Pips? Something about
Pips. I mean, is that George Schultz?
Marty Schultz.
Oh, that might be his son. The original owner was George Schultz, but it was a place that a lot of comics from Brooklyn went to. Okay. It was a tough room, a lot of hecklers. Rodney broke in there. So did Dice. Seinfeld used to go there. It was in Sheepshead Bay where I grew up. So, I mean, it's kind of a place that I know about in Sheepshead Bay.
Okay. I think we've gotten through most. Oh, yeah. A couple other random shots here.
What do you got? Oh, yeah. I thought this is interesting because he talks about Bill Gates and he says that's me and Bill Gates waiting for hookers. I don't know. And I know it's a joke.
Maybe,
Rodney,
maybe
but
not.
maybe not. Maybe not. And he was like joking. He's going, what do you care? You got so much money. What are you even bothering with me for? You know, he was.
And the other Bill.
There's the other Bill, Dollar Bill Clinton. Yeah. There's the other one who writes on a thing saying you gave me a lot of respect or something. But he will also end up playing a character named Larry Burns, who's Mr. Burns' son on The Simpsons. People don't remember this, that he was on The Simpsons playing a character as Mr. Burns' son, Rodney. But yeah, I mean, there's every celebrity wanted to take a picture of Rodney Dangerfield. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there's Robin. Yeah, there's a young. That's Mork and Mindy era Robin. I mean, a strange guy, Robin Williams.
And then later.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he loved Robin. It's just that Robin was not the type of comic that he was revered. He really loved Sam. And Dice was more like Rodney Dangerfield. Dice was a modern-day, leather-clad Lords of Flatbush version of Rodney Dangerfield with machine gun style one-liners that Dice was able to write, and Rodney revered Dice for that.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah, that's a great photo.
All of these comedians saw him as a father figure.
Yeah. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't make it. I mean, think about how old he is. You know, he's what, 80 in 2004.
82. Yeah.
He's 82, and 10 years before that, he's 72. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I mean, after, his career doesn't even take off until after he's 65 years old. For Christ's sakes.
Yeah, he was like 28 when he quit the first time till like
comes
40.
back at 40. He comes back at 40. But then it takes years from into the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it was also cool that he opened that club, which, like you said, it was the first club. He apparently opened that club when all the other clubs were shutting down. They were like, are you nuts?
Yeah.
Are you crazy? And he was able to like go appear on Carson or whatever and plug the club. But
then Carson would show up there. All these people would show up at the club, including us. But that was in the 80s already, including the Lampoon people. But, not that we were celebrities visibly, but I mean, he would have these guys sit. There's a little spot on the right where you could sit and be protected. But he got guys who wrote for him to end up writing for Carson. He helped writers privately on the side who we knew get jobs with Leno as writers. I mean, there are people that he went to bat for. Let me put it that way.
Paul Rodriguez said that Rodney used to buy jokes from them that weren't even very good. He said he bought a ton of my bad material that he never used just to give the guy grocery money or whatever else.
Well, Leno would buy jokes that were faxed to him from a guy in his basement in the Midwest. Like my friends who were writing for Leno would just go, "Hey, he's doing out jokes tonight," and they go, "Oh no, it just got bumped. The fax machine came through," and he'd send these guys $100 in the middle of Indiana who he never met. The fax machine was just churning jokes up until showtime with Jay Leno.
Wow.
Right. And they're non-union guys. I mean, you got union guys working there who are not happy that faxes are coming through to the office right before the show with one-liners on them.
I wonder if that's half the reason they hate him.
Yeah.
So I know Jay Leno is like one of those touchy subjects. Even in the chat, they're like, Jay Leno, blah, 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 blah. And like,
well, my very close friend of mine, Dave Hansen, who worked with me at Lampoon, used to write for Letterman. He said the greatest day of his life was getting fired by David Letterman. And the second greatest day was a week later getting hired by Jay Leno, one of the greatest employers he ever had. He said it was night and day working for Jay Leno or David Letterman. They hated David Letterman. Everybody who wrote for him just thought he was the biggest dick in the world, and he couldn't wait to get fired by David Letterman.
Yeah, and I kind of judge people buy that. It's like
That's the only thing I could go by.
He has the same people working for him for 20, 30 years. He has the same crew at his house doing the auto stuff. It's like, this guy can't be that bad if these people literally dedicate decades into being around him.
Yeah, you don't see David Letterman in any of these stories, do you?
Or Jimmy Kimmel.
No. I predict, as I said, when this Golden Globes debacle happened the other night, I predict all 3 of those late night hosts will be fired within a year.
Oh, please.
So you heard it here first. And it's not
take the same route as the CNN host, Don Lemon.
Yes. The woke thing is now coming apart comically. It's starting to shred itself. And I think that the networks they're not going to castigate them or anything. They're just going to say, we're going to go in another direction. And they're going to quietly get rid of all 3 of them within a year.
Hey, Trevor Noah's gone, so it's a good start.
Oh, yeah. I'm telling you, they're all done. When was the last time you heard about Eddie Izzard? When was the last time you heard about Sacha Baron Cohen? They went full woke, and those guys never work. And the guy who got the award at the Golden Globes does work, Ricky Gervais, and the other guy there, Jim Gaffigan, and also, mention of David Chappelle, Chris Rock. I mean, these guys are now, you will see a reemergence of what's his name, who was banned. I forget. He had a sitcom on TV for jerking off with these 2 girls.
Louis C.K.'s already made a comeback.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying nobody knows that he's made a comeback because nobody's seen him. But there is a certain degree that Louis C.K. is going to make a much bigger comeback. I predict.
Well, he did open Madison Square. I know. So
I know.
That's the good start.
It's going to be somebody like a Louis C.K. who's going to be the new host of one of these late night shows. I'm predicting. You heard it here first.
What about? I almost wish Ferguson would come back. I feel like he was kind of underrated, but really good.
I love Ferguson. I mean, I've known him a long time. That guy, he used to be a punk rock drummer in a band in England, even before he became a stand-up comic. Craig Ferguson is brilliantly a great writer and very funny.
Yeah, charming. He's got to just.
Yeah, he's very charming. He's very, very sweet guy. I know him personally.
Awesome. All right. Well, who we know, we have some.
Oh, by the way, I just want to say that we're going to try to put these clips up on Locals, so you could come over there and see these clips, which we could never do on YouTube, of course, because that's against the law. You could watch them on YouTube, but you can't watch them on our show on YouTube. So, right. That makes perfect sense in a perfect world. So we're going to have to put them up on Locals. I'm going to dig out some good ones. And I'll tell you something right now. If you get your hands on a couple of these albums, this was a Grammy Award winning album, I think in 1981, No Respect, won the Grammy Award for Best Comedy Album. And then this other one, which is The Loser, which is another great Rodney comedy album. If you could find those, you'll get yourself a couple hours of laughs in this dark period of American history.
Totally agree. Huh. All right. Al Gonzalez out of New York. Circa 1984. Took my girlfriend and her girlfriend to Dangerfields. Rodney was performing. He invited us back to his nearby apartment for drinks and blow. He scored with a friend. He had game.
Oh, he had game, Al. That's right. I didn't want to get into it, but obviously,
well, there you go.
It's past the statute of limitations on Gonzalez, so he could tell you those stories. But many of my friends had similar stories to that. The apartment was around the corner. Thanks for the 10 spot. Yeah, circa 1984ish. That's when I was going there to the club because I wasn't yet working for Lampoon, but hanging with those editors who I revered. At that time, and they went there all the time. So, yeah.
All right. Question: who was better, Rodney or Rickles?
Oh, it's not even close. Nobody even takes that seriously, bro. I mean, Rickles couldn't hold Rodney's jock. I mean, no way. There's no way.
Well, they're a whole different kind of thing.
No, but Rickles was all attitude. There was no jokes there. I mean, he was just a guy with a lot of
roaster, wasn't he?
Yeah. No, I mean, he was more than a roaster. I mean, he had a stand-up career that was enormous, but he couldn't hold Rodney's jock.
All right. Gregory Kent Smith, you get a bowl of soup with that hat, but it nice on you? What?
Okay, so this spectrum-y type disease is flipping out a lot of people across the country. Nobody's wearing a hat. Thank you for the $20, Gregory. but it's nice on you. Okay, maybe it's some vaudeville joke or something. I don't know. Anyway,
it might
thank
be.
you. Thank you.
BTK, Hunley is a tough crowd. Get him some booze.
Yeah, it's a rough crowd. I mean, it's a rough crowd. I try to get Hunley to laugh every week. It's a rough crowd with Hunley. Every once in a while, I get him to laugh, and I'm kind of surprised.
All right, Tom Woolley, Texas Tom here. Got my Youngstown VIP ticket. It will be epic like the last one. Well, hey, that's almost like a perfect lead-in to the fact that the meetup is official. The tickets are now on sale. You can find them in the descriptions.
You could drive there in your car from a lot of places, right? You
Absolutely.
You don't have to fly United, where apparently it came out today the CEO is a drag queen. Did you know this?
I saw that the shots of them, a couple.
What the hell is going on with these corporations?
With the t-shirt, it's going down behind him. I'm like, yeah, that's not where I want to fly.
Holy crap.
But yes, Youngstown, it's crazy where it is on the map. It's really close to a lot of places. Even Toronto is kind of just up the road a bit. I was like, how is Ohio near Buffalo? I mean, it's just, there's something with the way it lays out. And I'm not great on geography there, but I keep forgetting that Pennsylvania is almost, or New York's on top of Pennsylvania in a weird way.
In certain places.
Ohio is actually closer to chunks of New York. So I'm like.
And Youngstown's between Pittsburgh and Cleveland.
Well, in Akron, even more. It's like almost dead center between Akron and Pittsburgh. And that's like another half hour or so to Cleveland. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is there.
Oh, I'm definitely going there. Definitely.
NFL Hall of Fame is that there too? Or?
No, that's Canton, Ohio. That's I always use that as a joke. I don't know where Canton, Ohio. And we had a thing when we did the National Lampoon Sunday newspaper parody. We came up with Dacron, Ohio, a combination of Dayton and Akron. We created Dacron, Ohio, a phony town in Ohio. So there is no Dacron. So,
all right, well, it works for me.
Yeah. But yeah, so okay, so they get these.
Oh, it's a joke in Caddyshack written wrong. Oh, but it looks good on you though. That was
right. He picked out the hat in the gift shop, and Ted Knight was wearing the hat. It's a joke by Rodney in Caddyshack. He's correct. Yeah. Okay.
Pasha, Mark, your stories never disappoint. By the way, I listen to most of the show while out running errands. It's a balmy 7 degrees now in the Twin Cities.
Look, I don't know about the Twin Cities. Are there triplet cities? Are there cities that have 3 people cities? Why is it the Twin Cities? Why not the quadruple cities?
I don't know. We have the 7 cities here, but
the 7 of them. Okay. 7 degrees. Dear God, why do you people have to live like this? I don't understand.
Better them than me.
Yeah.
I already went through that in West Virginia, driving through the snow on the way back from Ohio. Not fun. But I am a coward, originally from Arizona, who does not like snowy weather.
Well, I mean, if you grew up in upstate New York, I didn't grow up there, but I lived there for a number of years. We used to get that same thing, that upstate New York. Like, I was looking at the game with Buffalo yesterday. The stands had like 10 feet of snow on the seats in the stands in Buffalo yesterday. But I could care less because my Packers beat Dallas. I could die right now. I don't care how far they go in the post. This last ranked seed beating the Cowboys in Dallas was such a pleasure to watch those people fighting among themselves. And I think the owner is Jerry Jones going to fire the entire staff.
Good.
But I was one of the best days of my life watching the Packers beat Dallas the other day. So I don't care what happens to the Packers after this. Everything else is a gift.
Oh, but anybody beating Dallas, I'm going to celebrate. Anybody beating Dallas. One more from Stephen McMahon. Kind of off topic, but Mark, do you think Bill Ayers was a CIA agent provocateur? His brief being make peace movement look bad?
No, I don't think so at all. He was a true believer. I think
he did work. There was CIA infiltration in the group who took advantage of the nutcase.
There was FBI intervention too with the Beards, but he wasn't. That's for sure. The guy has never deviated since day one. I mean, and his father, I think, was a business executive. All the people in the weather underground,
they're rich kids.
All of them were rich kids. The only one who wasn't was the guy they rejected, who was on the run looking for help, and that was Abby Hoffman.
You know what? They drew a parallel to that. Rich kids who like to bomb There's another one, Bin Laden.
Oh, that's where international kids. Yeah.
Yeah, but they have drawn these parallels, and they've said that a lot of times it's like these kids who are upper middle class or rich and they're bored, and they get involved in these.
Well, the girls, all those girls hated their fathers. They all talked about it in their memoirs. Every single one of them hated their dads. And they hated their moms for loving their dads.
Of course.
You know, they hated their mothers. They all talked about this, for the most part, in their various memoirs, that they hated their mothers for being 50s style housewives. You know, like that was, you know, completely verboten.
How dare they? It's just
how dare they be a housewife? You know what I mean? God forbid.
Anyway, thank you very much, Bill Kinsella. Another
Bill
AUS
Kinsella. I've been a fan for a while, Bill Kinsella.
Yeah.
I want to see, I'm going to watch The Killers. I want to see that Rodney shine in The Killers.
I think it's at 98 seconds in or something.
Oh, okay.
Look, I don't know, but he's an extra in it.
And The Projectionist. I want to see The Projectionist, you know.
That's on YouTube.
Yeah, no, I know. I
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to watch it, but yeah, that one looks crazy. Absolutely crazy.
All right. Well, we've got more things going on. So we're going to head over to locals. And Oswald is leading the way. He's the emotional support animal of the channel.
Mm-hmm.
And you can always be a locals member for free. Doesn't cost
Hey, what about
anything.
subscribing to this thing? These subscription numbers haven't moved. Hold on, let me get my bell. Maybe I need the bell.
Good idea. Here you go.
Yeah, hold on. Because I'm looking at this, the numbers don't seem to change for subscriptions and likes. What does a like do? Hold on, here's the bell. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, start the subscribing. Let's go, folks. Not working for free here. Come on, let's do something. Let's move these numbers. Come on, people. Let's go.
There you go. The like is supposed to help out, trigger the algorithm to share it to more people. So please hit the like if you haven't already. Always is helpful. Everything is helpful. And
that's going to be on Hunley's tombstone. Everything is helpful. Let me see that tombstone shot again. I want to see the Rodney tombstone shot. That's my favorite shot. I want to go visit his grave. I got a photo of Lenny Bruce's grave, so I want to get one of Rodney's tombstone.
Oh yeah, and you've got Hank Williams too. So why not?
I want to get a whole collection of these of my heroes. Oh, there goes the neighborhood. That's brilliant. Okay, now I feel better.
I feel better, and we can head over to locals. Feel better. Okay. We'll see everybody.
We're going to tell some really dark stories over on locals. I couldn't tell them here involving drugs and alcohol and hookers. So if you go over there, be prepared for some blow. And Al Gonzalez will be over there, and Alan's going to arrest Al Gonzalez, saying it's not on the statute of limitations in New York State, admitting you did blow with Rodney Dangerfield in 1984.
Okay. Look forward to that.